They told her to wait in the rain while the real snipers handled business. Captain Rain Kessler stood at the edge of the instructor platform at Fort Trenton, watching Carolina Clay turn to mud under a sky that looked like it had forgotten how to stop. 30 meters away, 4 Army Ranger candidates laughed beneath the equipment, shed dry and certain of their world. She was 29 years old and had stopped expecting much from people a long time ago. The range stretched out before her empty except for the steel targets that waited in the distance like silent judges. She'd driven from the main compound in a government pickup, arriving 15 minutes early the way she always did. Her rifle case sat in the truck bed. Her range bag rested against the tailgate. Everything in its place, everything ready. The candidates didn't know she could hear them. The rain swallowed most sounds, but not the laughter, not the words that carried across wet air like they always did. Someone needs to tell her the real instructor's probably running late. That was Specialist Garrett Braddock, tall, broad-shouldered, the kind of man who'd never had to prove himself because his presence did it for him, and at least that's what he believed. Maybe she should wait in the vehicle while the adults handle this. Sergeant Davis Merrick, 26 years old, combat deployment to Kandahar. Father served in Desert Storm. Davis had grown up on stories about what real standards looked like back when warriors were warriors and everyone knew their place. The third man, Private First Class Ethan Collier, said nothing. He shifted his weight from foot to foot, uncomfortable, in a way that suggested he understood something the others didn't. Youth sometimes brought clarity the old hands had lost. The fourth candidate stood furthest back in the shadow of the shed. Corporal Nash Donovan, silent, calculating. The most dangerous kind of skeptic because he didn't need to say anything. His doubt lived in his eyes in the way he watched her like she was a problem that math couldn't solve. Rain adjusted the brim of her patrol cap. Water ran down the back of her neck. She'd grown up in eastern Montana on a cattle ranch where winter lasted 8 months, and the nearest hospital sat 60 miles down roads that disappeared in snow. Her father, a Marine Scout sniper from the Cold War in Desert Storm, had taught her to shoot at 7, because on their land, when something went wrong, help wasn't coming. The lesson stuck. By 12, she could read wind at 400 meters and correct for temperature drop without pulling out a chart. She learned patience in deer blinds and trigger control on coyotes that threatened the herd. Her father never said she was good, he just handed her harder shots. She enlisted at 18, passed the Ranger Assessment and Selection Program, with scores that made drill sergeants check the paperwork twice, looking for the mistake that would explain it. There was no mistake. She attended the Special Operations Target Interdiction course at Fort Trenton, spent 3 years with a Ranger Rifle Company running rotations through Afghanistan and Ardan Valley, earned her Expert Infantry badge through qualification and lane testing, had her Ranger tab by 24. At 27, during a compromise in Sangra Province, she saved 2 teammates by taking out an enemy machine gunner at 1,130 meters with her M2010 rifle. Single shot, MK248 Mod 1 match-grade ammunition. Her spotter called corrections. She felt the wind shift, trusted her read, and sent the round downrange. The steel rang, the machine gun went silent. Her squad had 8 seconds to break contact. Every one of them made it home. She didn't talk about it much. The people who mattered already knew. The people who didn't wouldn't believe it anyway. Rain believed in standards, in discipline, in the idea that competence should count for more than anything else. She'd spent 11 years proving it over and over to people who'd already made up their minds before she walked in the room. The 4 Ranger candidates had been told they'd be evaluated by a senior instructor as part of their final certification before Joint Special Operations Command screening. When Rain walked onto the range that morning in her patrol cap and combat boots, rifle case under one arm, Garrett Braddock had looked her up and down like she'd wandered onto the wrong movie set. "You lost, ma'am. The admin building's back that way." Rain told them her name and rank, said she'd be running their qualification. The temperature in the shed dropped about 10 degrees. Davis Merrick shook his head. "Real instructor's probably stuck in traffic. No disrespect, ma'am, but maybe you should wait for him." "There is no him," Rain said. Her voice carried the flat certainty of Montana winters. "Range is reserved under my name. Credentials are on file. You can shoot or you can pack up and leave." Davis glanced at Garrett. Something unspoken passed between them, the kind of silent conversation men have when they think they're the only ones who understand how the world really works. "We'll shoot," Davis said, "but only if you prove you can do it first. Otherwise, it's a waste of everyone's time." Rain nodded once. "Set up the targets." Garrett muttered something under his breath that made Ethan Collier stare hard at the ground. Nash Donovan's expression didn't change, but his eyes tracked Rain as she turned and walked back to the pickup truck, measuring, judging, finding her wanting before she'd even touched a rifle. What none of them knew was that their conversation had been broadcast across the range operations net. The OIC channel sat unencrypted, open to anyone monitoring the frequency. 20 meters north in a radio room that overlooked the firing line, someone had heard every word. And 20 miles beyond that, a Navy SEAL commander named Dex Harlow sat in a tactical operations center listening to men dismiss a sniper he had worked with in Ardon Valley. A woman who'd provided overwatch for his team during a direct action mission, putting rounds exactly where they needed to be, when they needed to be there with a precision that made professional warriors take notice. He remembered. But the four candidates didn't know that. They didn't know Rain had worked with SEALs, didn't know about Sangra Province, didn't know that her rifle had spoken for her in places where words meant nothing and only results mattered. They knew what they'd decided to know. Rain opened the rifle case in the bed of the pickup. Inside sat her M2010 broken down and cleaned with the kind of care that separated professionals from amateurs. The rifle had been with her for 6 years. She knew its weight, its balance, the way the trigger broke at exactly 3.5 pounds. She knew how it responded in heat and cold, in wind and rain, at sea level and at altitude. She assembled it slowly, checking the scope, mount, torque, running her thumb along the barrel, feeling for any imperfection she already knew wouldn't be there. Her hands moved on muscle memory the way they always did when her mind drifted to other places. She thought about her father, the man who taught her that respect wasn't handed out like participation trophies. You earned it, one shot at a time. She remembered being 12 years old in a February blizzard. Her father had been moving cattle to the south pasture when his horse spooked and threw him, broke 3 ribs, punctured a lung. He managed to radio the house before he passed out, barely conscious, lying in snow that fell so thick you couldn't see 10 feet. Rain grabbed the rifle, found him by following the horse's tracks. But the horse had run, and wolves had smelled blood. She saw them circling 400 meters out, gray shadows in white snow. 3 of them, moving closer. Her father couldn't move, couldn't defend himself. Help wasn't coming. The snow had closed the roads. She was the help. She made 3 shots, 400 meters in a blizzard with wind gusting 20 knots. 3 wolves, 3 hits. Her father lived because she didn't miss. He never said she'd done well. Just handed her the rifle the next day and said, "Now you know why we train." She thought about the 11 years she'd spent in uniform, the constant proving, the skeptical looks, the men who assumed she was there to check a box, to fill a quota, to make someone in Washington feel good about themselves. The exhaustion that came not from the work, but from having to justify her existence every single day. Rain didn't feel anger toward the 4 candidates. Anger was a luxury she couldn't afford. It clouded judgment, tightened muscles, pulled shots off target. What she felt was colder, sharper. She felt ready. She slid 5 rounds into the magazine, chambered 1, walked back to the firing line with the rifle in her hands and rain on her face. The weather had shifted. The downpour had faded to drizzle, but the wind had picked up. 12 knots gusting left to right, the kind of wind that pushed rounds off course if you didn't respect it. Temperature had dropped 3 degrees from an hour earlier. The air felt different, heavier. The target sat 1,000 meters downrange, a steel torso plate barely visible through the rain and low clouds that clung to the North Carolina hills. Not an easy shot, not meant to be. Rain dropped behind the rifle, adjusted the stock to her shoulder, let her body settle into the familiar position, every point of contact deliberate. Bipod legs steady in mud, left hand supporting the stock, right hand on the grip, cheek weld solid, eye to scope. She ranged the target with her laser finder. 1,012 meters. Entered the data into her Kestrel weather meter. Wind speed, direction, temperature, barometric pressure, humidity. The computer processed it all and gave her a firing solution. 2.3 mils elevation, 0.8 right for wind, but the gusts shifted every 10 seconds. The computer told her what the wind was doing. Experience told her what the wind was going to do. There was a difference, and that difference determined whether steel rang or rounds vanished into dirt. Behind her, Davis Merrick stood with his arms crossed. Garrett Braddock smirked, confident this would end the way he expected. Nash Donovan leaned against the shed with his rifle slung, watching with the patience of someone waiting for an inevitable conclusion. Ethan Collier shifted his weight again, uneasy but silent. Rain ignored them all. She'd learned a long time ago that other people's doubt wasn't her problem to solve. Her problem was 1,112 meters of air between her and the target. Her problem was reading wind she couldn't see and compensating for rotation and gravity and the way moisture changed ballistics. Everything else was noise. She adjusted her scope. 2 clicks right, 1 up. The corrections felt right in her hands in the way only 10,000 repetitions could make something feel. Her breathing slowed. Deep inhale through the nose. Exhale through the mouth. Letting her heart rate settle. Letting the world shrink until nothing existed except the reticle and the target and the space between. Her finger found the trigger. She applied pressure so gradually it felt like nothing at all. Like the rifle decided on its own when to fire. Smooth, inevitable. The shot broke clean. The M2010 recoiled into her shoulder. The suppressor redirected the blast, but she still felt the punch of the round leaving the barrel at 2,500 feet per second. Through the scope, she tracked the bullet's flight. It took just over a second to cross the distance, dropping and drifting following the path physics demanded. The steel plate rang. The sound reached her a moment later, delayed by distance. Clear, unmistakable. She worked the bolt, ejected the spent casing, watched it tumble through rain to land in mud, loaded another round, found the target again, fired. Ring, again, ring, again, ring. 5 shots, 5 hits, center mass, 90 seconds total. She stood, cleared the rifle, engaged the safety, turned to face the 4 candidates. Garrett Braddock was no longer smirking. His jaw had gone tight, the muscles working like he was chewing something bitter. Davis Merrick looked like he'd swallowed broken glass. Nash Donovan stared at the target downrange, then back at Rain, his face unreadable but no longer dismissive. Ethan Collier finally found his voice. "Where'd you learn to shoot like that?" "Montana," Rain said. "Fort Trenton. Downrange. Now, if you want to pass your qualification, you need to stop talking and start listening." The words landed in silence. The rain had stopped. The wind still gusted, but softer now, like it had said what it needed to say. That's when the radio on Rain's belt crackled to life. The voice that came through was calm, clipped, professional. The kind of voice that had given orders in places where mistakes cost lives. "Captain Kessler, this is Commander Harlow, SEAL Team 3. Are you still on the Fort Trenton Range Complex?" Rain unclipped the radio. "Affirmative. I have a problem and I need your help. 20 miles north at a classified training site. Tactical scenario unfolding. Primary sniper injured during insertion. Live fire interdiction exercise starts in 90 minutes. I need someone who can shoot reliably at extended range under pressure. Someone who won't freeze when things get messy." He paused. Rain heard background noise through the transmission. Radio chatter, helicopter orders, the controlled chaos of an operation spinning up. "I've been monitoring the shared range operations net," Harlow continued. "The OIC channel, unencrypted. I heard your conversation with those candidates. I heard everything they said." Another pause, shorter this time. "I worked with you in Ardon Valley, Captain. I remember. I trust you to do this right. Can you be here in 40 minutes? Rain didn't hesitate. "On my way." She ended the call, turned back to the 4 candidates. Davis had started to say something, but Nash cut him off. "Is she serious?" "Your qualification is postponed," Rain said. "Reschedule through range control. If any of you have a problem with that, call the range OIC. Explain why you spent 30 minutes questioning my credentials instead of shooting." She walked to the pickup truck, loaded her rifle, secured her gear, started the engine. Through the windshield, she saw the 4 men standing in the rain watching her leave. Garrett with his arms at his sides, all swagger gone. Davis staring at his boots. Nash nodding slowly like pieces of a puzzle had just fallen into place. Ethan looking confused and ashamed in equal measure. Rain didn't care about their reactions. She had 90 minutes to reach a classified site 20 miles north. had a mission brief to absorb, had a rifle to prepare, and dope to calculate, and a job to do. But as she drove, she thought about what would happen if she didn't show up. Thought about a SEAL team running an exercise without proper overwatch. Thought about the commander who'd heard those men dismiss her and had called anyway because he remembered Ardine Valley and knew what she could do. She thought about her father's words from 20 years ago, spoken in a Montana blizzard while wolves circled. Help isn't coming. Be the help. The road north cut through pine forest, still dripping from the rain. Rain drove with both hands on the wheel, her mind already shifting gears. Already leaving behind the range and the candidates and their doubt. Already focusing on wind calls and target distances and rules of engagement. Behind her at the Fort Trenton range, Ethan Collier pulled out his phone. Logged into the military personnel system. Searched for Captain Rain Kessler. Her service record filled the screen. Deployments to Afghanistan, Ardine Valley, Kandahar, awards and decorations, expert infantry badge, ranger tab, and buried 3 paragraphs down a citation for actions in Sangra province. Enemy machine gun position, 1,130 meters. Adverse conditions, 1 shot, 2 casualties prevented. Squad successfully extracted. Ethan showed the screen to Nash Donovan. Nash read it twice, handed the phone to Davis Merrick. Davis read it once and said nothing. Garrett Braddock looked over Davis's shoulder, his face going pale. "We screwed up," Nash said quietly. Nobody disagreed. 30 miles away in a range tower that overlooked the Fort Trenton complex, a man in his late 60s lowered a pair of binoculars. Master Sergeant Wade Garrison, retired Marine Corps, currently serving as a civilian training advisor. He'd watched the entire exchange from his elevated position. Watched Rain stand in the rain. Watched her put 5 rounds on target at 1,000 meters like she was swatting flies. Watched the candidates realize exactly how wrong they'd been. Wade picked up his own radio, switched to a command frequency. "Range tower to operations, this is Garrison. Captain Kessler just departed north. Estimate arrival at Site 7 in 35 minutes. The voice that answered belonged to a colonel. "Copy that. We're tracking her. How'd she handle the candidates?" Wade smiled, though nobody could see it. Same way her old man would have. Professionally, she let the rifle do the talking. "John Kessler's daughter," the colonel said. It wasn't a question. "Trained him myself back in '89. Marine Scout Sniper School. Best student I ever had. She's got the same instinct. Maybe better." "You heading north too?" "Already packing. Command asked me to observe the SEAL exercise. Figured I'd see what John's girl can do under real pressure. Keep me posted." Wade ended the transmission. Gathered his gear. He'd been observing training exercises and evaluations for the better part of 40 years. Cold War, Desert Storm, Afghanistan, Iraq. He'd seen every kind of shooter. The naturals, the grinders. The ones who folded under stress, and the ones who got better when things went sideways. He'd trained Rain's father in 1989, right before the Berlin Wall came down, and everyone thought the skills wouldn't matter anymore. Taught him to read wind by watching heat shimmer. Taught him ballistics and range estimation and the kind of patience that separated snipers from everyone else who carried a rifle. John Kessler had been exceptional. Quiet, focused, the kind of man who didn't need to prove anything because the proof was in the work. Wade wondered if the daughter was the same. He'd find out soon enough. Rain reached the classified site 38 minutes after leaving Fort Trenton. The gate guard checked her credentials against a list, made a phone call, waved her through. Security was tight. Concrete barriers, armed sentries, the kind of place that didn't appear on maps. She parked near a tactical operations center, grabbed her rifle and gear. A staff sergeant met her at the door. "Captain Kessler, Commander Harlow's waiting. Follow me." The operations center hummed with controlled activity. Radios crackling, monitors showing feeds from multiple cameras. Officers studying maps and satellite imagery. The organized chaos of professionals preparing for something that mattered. Commander Dex Harlow stood at a central planning table. Late 30s, lean, the kind of weather that came from years spent in places where the sun burned and the wind scoured. He looked up when Rain entered, extended his hand. "Captain, thanks for coming on short notice." "Commander." They'd worked together 2 years ago in Ardine Valley, a direct action mission against a high-value target. Rain had provided overwatch from a ridge while Harlow's team made entry. She'd engaged 3 hostiles at ranges between 6 and 800 meters. Precision fire. No collateral damage. The mission succeeded because she'd kept threats off the assault element. Harlow hadn't forgotten, neither had she. Situations evolved since I called, Harlow said. He gestured to the map spread across the table. Terrain features marked in grease pencil, grid coordinates, phase lines. This isn't a drill anymore. We've got 8 operators, 15 clicks north. Reconnaissance element. They hit a compromise. Enemy force has them pinned down. Can't extract by helo because of ground fire. He traced a line on the map with his finger. They need precision overwatch to suppress threats and create a corridor for exfil. You'd be shooting from this ridge line, ranges between 400 and 900 meters. Multiple sectors. Moving targets. Rules of engagement are tight. Friendlies, danger close. Rain studied the map. Elevation lines showed the ridge was 100 meters higher than the target area. Good high ground, clear lines of sight. But the weather hadn't improved. Visibility would be limited. Wind would be unpredictable coming off the hills. Timeline, she asked. 2 hours before enemy reinforcements arrive, maybe less. We spin up exfil now, but the bird can't land until you clear the landing zone. What happened to your primary sniper? Separated shoulder during insertion. Can't hold a rifle steady. Rain nodded, looked at the map again, calculated distances and angles. Thought about wind and weather and the fact that she'd be making shots that determined whether 8 men lived or died. I'll need a spotter, she said. Already assigned. Chief Petty Officer Rodriguez. He's good. Never worked with Army before, but he knows his job. When do we move? 15 minutes. Helo's spooling up now. Harlow met her eyes. Captain, I'm not going to blow smoke. This is dangerous. It's real world. If you're not comfortable... I'm comfortable, Rain said. Let's get to work. Harlow smiled, not with relief but with recognition. He'd seen this before. The kind of person who didn't need a speech or reassurance, who understood what the job required and did it without drama. Welcome to the team, he said. The door opened. Wade Garrison walked in, rain still dripping from his jacket. He took in the room at a glance, saw Rain standing at the map table, saw Harlow briefing her. His expression didn't change, but something in his eyes suggested approval. Harlow noticed him. Master Sergeant Garrison, glad you could make it. Wouldn't miss it. Wade's voice carried the gravel of too many cigarettes and too many years. He looked at Rain, extended his hand. Captain Kessler, Wade Garrison, I worked with your father 89 to 91. Marine Scout Sniper School. Rain shook his hand. His grip was firm, but not aggressive. The handshake of someone who didn't need to prove anything. He mentioned you, Rain said. Said you were the best instructor he ever had. Your old man was being generous, but he was a hell of a shooter. Best student I trained in 28 years. Wade glanced at the map. Heard what happened at the range this morning. 5 for 5 at 1,000 meters in wind and rain. John would be proud. Thank you. I'm here to observe, Wade said. Command asked me to evaluate training protocols, but I'll stay out of your way. This is your show. Rain appreciated that. Some advisors couldn't help themselves, couldn't resist offering suggestions or second-guessing decisions. Wade seemed like the kind who understood that the best way to evaluate someone was to let them work. A staff sergeant appeared in the doorway. Commander Helo's ready. Copy. Harlow looked at Rain. You good to go? Ready. Then let's move. They walked out into the rain. The helicopter sat on a concrete pad 50 meters away, rotors already turning. A UH-60 Blackhawk. The crew chief waited at the door, scanning the area with the alertness of someone who'd seen too many hot landings. Rain climbed aboard, secured her rifle, strapped in. The interior smelled like hydraulic fluid and old canvas. Wade Garrison took a seat near the cockpit. Harlow sat across from Rain, checking his radio. The helicopter lifted. The ground fell away. Through the open door, Rain watched Fort Trenton disappear behind the hills. She thought about the 4 candidates standing in the rain. Thought about the qualification they'd have to reschedule. Thought about whether they'd learned anything from what had happened. Then she stopped thinking about them entirely. Because 15 kilometers north, 8 men were pinned down and waiting for help that was coming in the form of a helicopter and a rifle and a woman those candidates had left standing in the rain. Help was coming. She was the help. The helicopter dropped through clouds that hung over the North Carolina hills like smoke. Rain watched the terrain through the open door. Pine forest gave way to rocky ridgelines. Elevation climbed. The air got colder. Commander Harlow leaned close, speaking over the rotor noise. Landing zone is 300 meters south of your position. We'll drop you and Rodriguez on the ridge. You hump to the overlook. Set up and wait for my signal. Rain nodded, checked her rifle for the third time. Everything secure. Everything ready. Team leader on the ground is Lieutenant Jake Collier, Harlow continued. 8-man element. They were running reconnaissance when they hit an enemy patrol. 3 hostiles down, but more showed up. Now they're pinned in a ravine waiting for us to get them out. The name registered. Collier. Same as the private at the range. Ethan Collier. The quiet one who'd looked uncomfortable while his buddies dismissed her. Collier, Rain said. Related to a Ranger candidate, Ethan Collier. Harlow's expression shifted. That's Jake's younger brother. Kid's going through selection. You know him? He was one of the 4 at my range this morning. Harlow processed that. Small world. Jake doesn't know you're coming. Radio discipline is tight. We'll inform him once you're in position. Rain thought about Ethan standing in the rain. His discomfort had been real. Like he'd known something was wrong but didn't have the spine to say it. Now his brother's life depended on a woman Ethan had watched his teammates disrespect. The irony wasn't lost on her. The helicopter banked. Through the door, Rain saw the ridge, a rocky spine that ran north to south, covered in scrub pine and boulders. Good elevation. Clear sight lines into the valley below. She could already see the tactical value. This was the kind of ground snipers dreamed about. The crew chief held up 5 fingers. 5 minutes. A man in his 30s moved towards her from the rear of the helicopter. Hispanic features, compact build. Eyes that had seen things and cataloged them with professional detachment. He wore a plate carrier and carried a spotting scope in a hard case. Captain Kessler, Chief Petty Officer Rodriguez, I'm your spotter. They shook hands. His grip was firm and brief. You worked with Army snipers before, Rainey asked. No, ma'am, mostly SEAL shooters. But Commander Harlow says you're solid. That's good enough for me. You spot, I shoot. We communicate clearly. No ego, just the work. Rodriguez nodded. I can do that. How's your wind reading? I won't lie to you, Captain. I'm good, but I've never worked with you. I don't know your style. First few shots, there might be adjustment. After that, we should sync up. Rain appreciated the honesty. Some spotters pretended they were perfect. Rodriguez understood that every shooter-spotter pair needed time to calibrate, to learn each other's patterns. They didn't have much time, but at least he was realistic about it. The helicopter descended. The crew chief signaled 2 minutes. Rain and Rodriguez moved to the door. The landing zone came into view, a small clearing on the ridge barely large enough for the bird to touch down. The helicopter flared. Wheels kissed rock. The crew chief waved them out. Rain jumped first, landed in a crouch, Rodriguez right behind her. They moved away from the aircraft weapons, up scanning the terrain. The helicopter lifted immediately. The rotor wash flattened the brush around them, then the bird climbed and disappeared into the clouds. Silence rushed in to fill the space. Just wind through pine branches and the distant sound of thunder rolling across the hills. Rodriguez checked his GPS, pointed northeast. 300 meters. Overlook should give us clear sight to the valley. They moved fast. Rain in front, Rodriguez trailing with the spotting scope. The ground was uneven, loose rock and exposed roots, the kind of terrain that punished carelessness. But they covered the distance in 12 minutes, staying low, using the terrain for concealment. The overlook was exactly what they needed. A rocky outcrop that jutted from the ridgeline like a ship's prow. Below, the valley spread out in a bowl shape. Trees and boulders. A dry creek bed cutting through the center. And somewhere down there, 8 seals waiting for extraction. Rain dropped behind a boulder. Set up her rifle on the bipod. Rodriguez knelt beside her, assembling the spotting scope. They worked without speaking. Professionals who understood that the time for questions had passed. Rodriguez glassed the valley through his scope. I've got movement. Northwest quadrant, 500 meters, 2 hostiles, AK pattern rifles. Rain found them through her rifle scope. 2 men in mismatched fatigues moving between boulders. Searching, hunting. Hold fire, Rodriguez said, waiting for commander's signal. Rain settled into position, let her body relax into the shooting platform. The boulder in front of her provided solid support. The wind was gusting from the west at about 15 knots. She could feel it on her face, could see it in the way the pine branches moved. Steady, but not consistent. The kind of wind that required constant adjustment. Her radio crackled, Harlow's voice barely above a whisper. Overwatch, this is actual. How copy? Rodriguez keyed his radio. Actual Overwatch. Lima Charlie. In position with clear sight lines. Stand by. 30 seconds of silence. Then Harlow again. Overwatch, be advised, this is not an exercise. Repeat, not an exercise. 8 operators pinned in ravine grid, November Sierra 473, 821. Multiple hostiles in the area. Unknown total count. Your mission is to provide precision fire support to enable extraction. Engagement authority granted. Rules of engagement. Positive identification required. Friendlies or danger close. Confirm you understand. Rodriguez looked at Rain. She nodded. Actual Overwatch confirms. Understand mission. Ready to execute. Copy. Stand by for target designation. Rain's heart rate kicked up a notch. Not with fear, but with focus. This was real. Not a qualification. Not a demonstration. 8 men down there counting on her to do her job. Rodriguez adjusted his spotting scope. I've got the ravine, southeast side. I can see our guys. They're pinned behind a rock formation. Hostiles have them bracketed from 2 positions. Rain shifted her rifle, found the ravine, saw movement, green fatigues, American gear, the SEALs. Then she scanned the surrounding terrain, looking for threats. First target, Rodriguez said, northwest 485 meters, hostile behind pine tree. He's got angle on our guys. Rain found him, a man in dark clothing, AK rifle using the tree for cover. He'd lean out, fire, a burst, pull back. Disciplined, trained, not a farmer with a rifle. This was someone who knew what he was doing. Wind is 15 knots, gusting to 18. Right to left, Rodriguez said. Temperature 48 degrees. Barometric pressure 29.85. Rain entered the data mentally, calculated the correction. The target was at a slightly lower elevation. Shooting downhill meant adjusting for the angle. She dialed her scope. 2.7 mils up, 1.2 left for wind. Ready, she said. Send it. The rifle punched into her shoulder. Through the scope, she saw the impact. Center mass. The hostile dropped behind the tree and didn't move again. Hit, Rodriguez confirmed. Target down. No time to think about it. Rodriguez was already calling the next target. Second target, northeast 510 meters. Hostile moving between boulders. Rain found him, tracked his movement, waited for him to pause. When he stopped to aim his rifle toward the ravine, she fired. Hit! Target down! The engagement tempo increased. Rodriguez spotted targets and called ranges. Rain made adjustments and fired. 730 meters, 880 meters, back to 510. Each shot required a new calculation. New wind read, new compensation for distance and angle. They worked together like they'd been doing this for years instead of minutes. Rodriguez's calls were clear and precise. Rain's shots landed where they needed to land. The rhythm built. The synchronization improved. After the 6th target, Rodriguez paused. Captain, I need to say something. Rain worked the bolt, ejected the casing. Say it. I've worked with SEAL snipers for 12 years. You're as good as any of them. Better than most. Copy, Rain said, not because she needed the validation, but because acknowledging his observation was the professional thing to do. The radio crackled again. Harlow's voice. Overwatch actual. Outstanding work. Enemy pressure is decreasing. Preparing to move casualties to extract point. Continue suppression. Actual Overwatch copies. Casualties. That meant someone was hurt. Maybe more than one. Rain pushed the thought away. Her job wasn't to worry about casualties. Her job was to keep shooting so the casualties could get out. Rodriguez scanned the valley. Movement, multiple hostiles, northwest quadrant. They're massing. Looks like they're preparing to assault. Rain saw them. 5 men, maybe 6, moving with purpose, coordinating. This wasn't random anymore. This was organized. Range to lead element, 680 meters. Rain engaged. Dropped the lead man. Shifted to the second. Fired. The group scattered. They'd figured out where the fire was coming from. Started moving to positions that offered concealment from the ridge. They're adapting, Rodriguez said. Getting smart. Thunder rolled across the valley. Except it wasn't thunder. Rain recognized the sound. Lightning was coming, but so was something else. The atmospheric pressure was dropping. She could feel it in her sinuses, in the way the air tasted. Storm's building, she said. Rodriguez checked his kestrel. Barometric pressure dropping fast. Winds picking up. This is going to get ugly. The first drops of rain hit 30 seconds later. Light at first, then heavier. The visibility that had been marginal became worse. The valley disappeared into gray curtains of rain that swept across the terrain like moving walls. Actual overwatch. Weather is deteriorating. Visibility compromised. Copy overwatch. Extraction helo is inbound. 5 minutes out. Keep the landing zone clear. 5 minutes. Rain could work with that. But then the lightning started. Real lightning this time. Strikes hitting the ridgeline to the north. Close enough that she could smell ozone. Close enough that the hair on her arms stood up. And with the lightning came interference. The radio hissed and popped. Harlow's voice cut in and out, fragmented by static. Overwatch. Actual. Casualties moving. Landing zone. Repeat. Then nothing. Just white noise. Rodriguez keyed his radio. Actual overwatch. You're breaking up. Repeat last transmission. Static. Actual how copy? Nothing. Rodriguez looked at Rain. We just lost comms. Rain felt the situation shift. No radio meant no coordination. No updates. No way to confirm that the SEALs were moving, or that the helicopter was coming, or that anything was going according to plan. They were on their own. We keep working, Rain said. We can see the valley. We engage threats. That's the mission. Rodriguez nodded, went back to his spotting scope. Movement. Southeast. Near the ravine. I think that's our guys moving. Rain saw them through the rain. 8 figures in American gear moving in tactical formation. 2 of them were being supported. The casualties. They were heading toward an open area at the south end of the valley, the landing zone. But they weren't the only ones moving. Multiple hostiles converging on the landing zone, Rodriguez said. His voice stayed calm, but Rain heard the tension underneath. They know where exfil is happening. They're trying to cut them off, Joanne. Rain scanned the terrain, saw them. Hostile forces moving from 2 directions, trying to get between the SEALs and the landing zone. If they succeeded, the extraction would turn into a firefight at close range. Casualties would increase. The helicopter might not be able to land. Range to lead hostile, 820 meters, moving fast. Rain fired. Missed. The wind had shifted again, gusting harder now. The rain was affecting visibility. She could barely see the target through her scope. Winds all over the place, Rodriguez said. I can't get a solid read. Rain fired again. This time she led the target more, compensated for what she thought the wind was doing. The hostile went down, but more were coming. She engaged the next target, 900 meters, moving between trees. She fired, hit, worked the bolt, found the next threat, fired. The rhythm was faster now, less precise. She was shooting on instinct as much as calculation. Through the rain, she saw the SEALs reach the landing zone, saw them set up a perimeter, saw muzzle flashes as they engaged threats Rain couldn't see from her position. Then she heard it, the helicopter. The sound carried through the storm, a Black Hawk pushing through rain and wind, coming in low and fast. Helo's inbound, Rodriguez said. Southeast approach. Rain saw it. The aircraft appeared through the clouds like a ghost, flying nap of the earth rotors churning rain into mist. The pilot was good, threading the needle between ridgelines in weather that should have grounded anything with rotors. The helicopter flared over the landing zone, started to descend, and that's when Rain saw him. A hostile, 920 meters, northwest of the landing zone, moving to a position that would give him a clear shot at the helicopter. He was carrying something larger than a rifle. RPG, rocket-propelled grenade. One shot from that, and the helicopter would go down. Everyone aboard would die. The SEALs on the ground would be stranded. RPG, Rain said. Northwest 920 meters. Rodriguez swung his spotting scope. I see him. He's setting up. You've got maybe 3 seconds before he fires. 920 meters. In rain, with wind gusting over 20 knots. The target was moving to a firing position, kneeling behind a boulder, lifting the RPG to his shoulder. Rain's scope was already dialed for 800 meters. She adjusted. 3 mils up. The wind was impossible to read. She could see trees bending. Could see rain sheeting sideways. The computer in her kestrel would be guessing. The data was too chaotic. She closed her eyes for half a second, felt the wind on her face, remembered Montana, remembered blizzards where you couldn't see 10 feet, where you had to feel the wind because you couldn't measure it, where your instinct mattered more than any instrument. Her father's voice in her head, technology fails, fundamentals don't. She opened her eyes, found the target. He was aiming the RPG at the helicopter. 2 seconds, maybe less. Rain forgot the computer, forgot the calculations. She read the wind the way her father had taught her, by feel, by instinct, by trusting what she'd learned over 10,000 shots in conditions just as bad as this. She led the target, compensated it for the wind she felt more than measured. Let her breathing settle even though her heart was hammering. Let the shot break when it was ready. The rifle fired. Through the scope, she saw the impact. The hostile with the RPG jerked backward. The rocket launcher fell from his hand. He collapsed behind the boulder. The RPG didn't fire. The helicopter touched down. The SEALs rushed aboard, wounded first, then the others, providing covering fire as they moved. The crew chief at the helicopter door pulled them in one by one. Rain kept her scope on the valley, looking for more threats. Rodriguez called out targets. She engaged, kept the pressure on, kept the hostiles pinned while the extraction happened. The last SEAL climbed aboard. The helicopter lifted, rotors biting air, climbing through rain and wind, banking away from the ridgeline, disappearing into the clouds. Gone. Rain lowered her rifle. Her hands were shaking. Not with fear, with the adrenaline dump that came after you'd been running on pure focus for 30 minutes, and suddenly the pressure released. Rodriguez was staring at her. That shot, 920 meters, moving target, rain, wind. How did you make that? Rain didn't answer immediately. She was thinking about the hostile with the RP, about the 3 seconds she'd had to set up and fire, about the fact that if she'd missed, the helicopter would have been hit. 8 SEALs plus the flight crew would have died. Montana, she finally said. My father taught me to trust fundamentals when technology fails. Rodriguez shook his head slowly. I've worked with snipers for 12 years. Never seen anyone make that shot in these conditions. The radio crackled back to life. The lightning had moved on. Harlow's voice came through clear. Overwatch actual, all personnel extracted, mission success, outstanding work. Exfil Bird is inbound to your position. 2 minutes. Rodriguez keyed his mic. Actual Overwatch copies, standing by for pickup. They broke down their gear in silence. Rain secured her rifle. Rodriguez packed the spotting scope. The rain was already easing, the storm passing as quickly as it had come. A different helicopter appeared, another Black Hawk. It settled onto the ridge 200 meters from their position. They humped to it and climbed aboard. Inside, Wade Garrison sat near the cockpit. He'd watched the entire engagement from the command center, seen every shot on the video feeds from the observation drones. He nodded to Rain as she strapped in. No words, just the acknowledgement of one professional to another. The helicopter lifted. Rain watched the valley disappear below, thought about the 11 targets she'd engaged, 11 shots that mattered, 11 decisions made in seconds that determined whether men lived or died. The weight of it settled on her shoulders, not heavy enough to crush, just heavy enough to remember, to understand what the work meant, what it required. The helicopter banked toward Fort Trenton. Through the open door, Rain could see the training complex in the distance, the ranges where she'd stood in the rain that morning, where 4 candidates had dismissed her, where she'd put 5 rounds on target and proved nothing except what she already knew. That morning felt like a different lifetime. The helicopter touched down at the classified site. They climbed out, walked to the operations center. Inside, Commander Harlow waited. He looked tired, relieved, the kind of exhausted that came from watching your people in danger and being unable to do anything except trust the plan. He shook Rain's hand. Captain, you saved 8 lives today, including Lieutenant Collier. His brother's going to be grateful. Rain thought about Ethan Collier standing in the rain, about Nash Donovan and Davis Merrick and Garrett Braddock, about men who judged her before she'd fired a shot. How's the lieutenant? She asked. Took shrapnel from a grenade. He'll be fine. So will the others. Thanks to you. Wade Garrison approached. He'd been standing near the map table watching the debriefing. Now he looked at Rain with something that might have been respect, or might have been recognition, or might have been both. That 920-meter shot, Wade said. In the rain, moving target. You didn't use your kestrel for the final correction. I saw you close your eyes, read the wind by feel. Rain met his gaze. Technology was giving me bad data. Too much chaos. I went with fundamentals. Your father did the same thing. Germany 1990, Soviet observation post, storm conditions. His equipment failed. He made the shot by trusting what he knew instead of what the machines told him. He never mentioned that. He wouldn't. John wasn't one for war stories, but I was there. I saw it. Same instinct you showed today. Same trust in fundamentals when everything else fails. Wade paused. I trained your father in '89. Best sniper I ever taught. Until today. The words landed quietly. No fanfare, no ceremony. Just a simple statement from a man who'd spent 40 years evaluating shooters and knew excellence when he saw it. Thank you, Rain said. Don't thank me. You earned it. Every bit of it. Harlow cleared his throat. Captain, there's something else you need to know. This mission wasn't just about extraction. Senior Army brass were observing remotely, watching the feeds, evaluating. Rain felt something shift in the room. The way people looked at her changed, like they knew something she didn't. Evaluating what she asked. Female Sniper Integration Program, Harlow said. They've been watching for 6 months. Multiple candidates, different scenarios. Your performance today was the final test. The decision makers needed to see someone perform under real pressure, real stakes, no safety net. He pulled a folder from the table, handed it to her. You just changed policy, Captain. The program moves forward, full integration, training pipeline. Standards don't change, but the door's open. Rain opened the folder. Inside were orders, recommendations, a letter from a 2-star general she'd never met. The words blurred together. All she could process was the weight of what Harlow had said. 6 months of evaluation, multiple candidates. She'd been the one to succeed not because of quotas or politics, but because when 8 men needed help, she delivered. She thought about her father's words. Help isn't coming. Be the help. She'd been the help. There's more, Harlow said. You have 3 offers on the table. Senior instructor position at the Special Operations Target Interdiction Course, SEAL Integration Advisor, or the U.S. Army Marksmanship Team, International Competition. Your choice. Rain looked at the folder, at the orders, at the future laid out in official letterhead and bureaucratic language. She thought about the 4 candidates at the range, about Ethan Collier and his brother Jake, about the next generation of soldiers who would face the same doubt she'd faced, the same proving, the same exhaustion of being judged before they'd earned judgment. I need time to decide, she said. You've got it, Harlow replied. Report your decision in 72 hours. The meeting ended. People filtered out. Wade Garrison lingered near the door. He caught Rain's eye, gave her a small nod. Then he left too. Rain stood alone in the operations center. The room was quiet now, just the hum of electronics and the distant sound of helicopters on the flight line. She looked at the map on the table, at the valley where she'd spent 30 minutes behind a rifle, at the grid coordinates where 8 SEALs had waited for extraction, at the place where she'd made a shot that mattered more than any qualification or demonstration ever would. Her radio crackled, a voice she didn't recognize. Captain Kessler, this is Range Control. Message for you. 4 Ranger candidates have requested to reschedule their qualification. They specifically requested you as evaluator. Acknowledge. Rain keyed her radio. Range Control, I copy. Schedule them for next week. I'll run the course. Roger that. Also, you have messages waiting. Multiple missed calls. Should I forward? Negative, I'll check them later. She ended the transmission, walked outside. The rain had stopped completely. The sky was clearing. Evening light broke through the clouds, painting everything in gold and amber. A truck waited to take her back to Fort Trenton. She climbed in, started the engine, drove south through hills that were already drying. Steam rose from the pavement where sunlight hit. She thought about Montana, about blizzards and wolves and a 12-year-old girl who'd made 3 shots that saved her father's life, about the lesson learned that day. That help wasn't something you waited for. Help was something you became. She thought about the machine gunner in Sangra province, about 8 seconds and the weight of knowing your shot mattered. She thought about today, about 11 targets and 920 meters in an RPG that never fired. The weight was the same. The responsibility was the same. The knowledge that people counted on you to be exactly as good as you needed to be exactly when you needed to be it. That was the job. That was the work. And tomorrow, 4 candidates would come back to the range. They'd shoot under her evaluation. They'd learn whether they measured up to the standards or whether they needed more time, more training, more proving, just like she'd been proving for 11 years. The difference now was that she'd stopped proving to them. She proved to herself, proved that when it mattered most, she could deliver. Everything else was noise. Rain drove through the gate at Fort Trenton as the sun touched the horizon. The guard waved her through. She parked at her barracks, grabbed her rifle, walked inside. Her phone showed 17 missed calls. She ignored them. Went to the armory, cleaned her rifle with the same care she always did, breaking it down, inspecting every component, oiling what needed oil, making sure everything was perfect for the next time it mattered. Because there would be a next time. There always was. When the rifle was clean and secured, she went to her room, sat on the edge of her bed, let the exhaustion catch up to her. Not physical exhaustion, mental, the kind that came from being switched on for hours at full intensity. She thought about the 3 offers: instructor, advisor, competition shooter. She thought about what her father would say. She thought about what Wade Garrison had said. That legacy wasn't about fame. It was about who you trained, what you left behind. She thought about the next generation, the Ethan Colliers of the world, the ones who wanted to learn but didn't know how to speak up when it mattered, the ones who needed someone to show them that excellence wasn't about gender or politics or quotas. It was about fundamentals, about standards, about being so good at what you did that doubt became irrelevant. Rain lay back on her bed, closed her eyes, made her decision. She'd take the instructor position. She'd build the pipeline. She'd train the next generation of snipers, male and female, to understand that when help was needed, they were the help. The job wasn't finished. It was just beginning. Morning came to Fort Trenton with the kind of clarity that follows a storm. Rain woke before dawn the way she always did. Showered, dressed in her combat uniform, made coffee that tasted like motor oil but delivered the caffeine she needed. Her phone showed 23 missed calls now. Messages from people she didn't know. Requests for interviews. Questions about the mission. Someone from public affairs wanting to coordinate a press release. She deleted them all. The mission wasn't a story. It was 8 men who came home. That was the only thing that mattered. She walked to the dining facility, grabbed breakfast, sat alone near a window that looked out over the ranges. The sun was climbing over the eastern ridgeline. Light spilled across the training complex like liquid gold. Another day, another chance to do the work. Her radio buzzed. Range control. Captain Kessler, this is Range Ops. Your qualification course is scheduled for 0900 next Wednesday. 4 candidates confirmed. Also, you have a visitor at headquarters. Colonel's office. He requested you report at 0800. Rain checked her watch. 0715. Copy, I'll be there. She finished her coffee, walked across the compound to headquarters. The building was old, built in the 1960s when Fort Trenton was established. Concrete and efficiency. No wasted space or decoration. The colonel's aide waved her through. He's expecting you, ma'am. Colonel Morrison sat behind a desk covered in files and coffee cups. Late 50s, thin gray hair, the weathered look of someone who'd spent 30 years in uniform and carried the weight of every decision. He stood when Rain entered. Captain Kessler, sit. She sat. Morrison studied her for a moment, not with judgment, but with the assessment of someone trying to measure what he was dealing with. I've read the after-action reports from yesterday's mission, Commander Harlow's evaluation, Master Sergeant Garrison's observations. They're all saying the same thing. That was exceptional work. Thank you, sir. 11 targets engaged, 11 hits, including a 920-meter shot on a moving target in adverse conditions. Shot that prevented an RPG strike on an extraction helicopter. Morrison leaned back in his chair. Captain, do you understand what you did yesterday? I did my job, sir. You did more than that. You changed the conversation. For 6 months, senior leadership has been debating whether female integration in sniper roles is viable, whether the standards can be maintained, whether operational effectiveness would be compromised. Yesterday, you answered those questions. Morrison opened a folder, pulled out a document. You have 3 offers. I'm here to discuss them and help you make an informed decision. Rain had already decided, but she let him continue. First option, senior instructor at the Special Operations Target Interdiction course. You'd be training the next generation of military snipers. High impact, direct influence on standards and doctrine. It's important work. He pulled out another page. Second option, SEAL Integration Advisor. You'd help develop the pipeline for female snipers in naval special warfare. Policy work, curriculum development, making sure the program succeeds. Third option, U.S. Army Marksmanship Team, international competition. You'd represent the country, win medals, raise the profile of military shooting sports. Good for morale, good for recruiting. Morrison set the papers down. All 3 are yours if you want them. What's your preference? Instructor position, sir. He nodded like he'd expected that answer. Why? Because competition shooting is about ego. Advisory work is about politics. Teaching is about standards. I want to train people who'll do the job right when it matters. You'll be training female candidates. You understand that? I'll be training snipers, sir. Gender doesn't matter. Standards do. Morrison smiled slightly. Your father said almost the same thing to me 20 years ago. Different context. Same principle. Rain felt something shift. You knew my father, John Kessler. Yes, I was a captain when he was going through advanced training. Watched him shoot. Watched him work. He had the same attitude you do. No excuses, no shortcuts, just the work. Morrison paused. He'd be proud of what you did yesterday. The words hit harder than Rain expected. Her father had died 3 years ago. Heart attack while moving cattle. He'd gone fast. No warning. No chance to say goodbye. She'd gotten the call while deployed in Kandahar. Made it home for the funeral but spent the whole time numb, unable to process that the man who'd taught her everything was gone. Thank you, sir, she managed. Instructor position is yours. You'll start in 2 weeks. Report to the Special Operations Target Interdiction Course Commandant. He's expecting you. Morrison stood, extended his hand. Make us proud, Captain. I will, sir. She left the office, walked back across the compound. The weight of the decision settled on her shoulders. Not regret, just the understanding that she'd committed to something that would define the next chapter of her career. Maybe her life. Teaching wasn't glamorous. It didn't come with medals or recognition. It was repetition and patience and watching people make the same mistakes over and over until they finally got it right. But it mattered. It mattered more than anything else she could do. Her radio buzzed again. Different voice this time. Familiar. Captain Kessler, this is Master Sergeant Garrison. You have a minute? Go ahead. Meet me at Range 7. I have something for you. Range 7 was on the north side of the complex, a 1,000-meter range with elevated firing positions. Rain drove there in her pickup. Wade Garrison stood near the equipment shed holding a worn canvas bag. He looked older in daylight. 67 years showed in the lines on his face and the way he moved with careful deliberation. But his eyes were sharp, alert, the eyes of someone who still saw everything that mattered. Captain, he said, thanks for coming. What can I do for you, Master Sergeant? Wade set the bag on a bench, unzipped it. Inside was a book, old. The cover faded and creased. Marine Corps Scout Sniper Manual, 1976 edition. My instructor gave it to me when I graduated sniper school. I gave a copy to your father in '89. Now I'm giving this one to you." Rain took the book, opened it. The pages were yellowed and dog-eared. Handwritten notes filled the margins. Corrections, observations, knowledge passed down through generations. Inside the front cover was an inscription in faded ink. "Excellence is not inherited. It is earned then passed on. Master Sergeant Frank Davies, USMC 1976. Below that, in different handwriting, fundamentals never change. Trust them when everything else fails. Master Sergeant Wade Garrison, USMC 1989. And below that space for another inscription. "Your father earned his place," Wade said. "Then he passed it on to you. Now you'll pass it on to the next generation. That's how it works. That's how excellence survives." Rain closed the book, held it carefully. This wasn't just a manual. It was a lineage, a chain of knowledge stretching back 50 years. Men who trained other men who trained her. All of them connected by the same commitment to standards and fundamentals and doing the work right. "I'll honor this," she said. "I know you will. That's why I'm giving it to you." Wade looked out over the range. "I'm dying, Captain. Lung cancer. Smoked too many cigarettes watching Soviet positions in Berlin. Maybe 6 months, maybe a year. Before I go, I need to know the knowledge continues." The words landed heavy, final. Rain had seen death before, combat, training accidents, her father's heart attack. But this was different. This was someone choosing to tell her, trusting her with the information because it mattered to what came next. "I'm sorry," she said. "Don't be. I had a good run. 40 years of teaching, hundreds of snipers, good men, your father among them. Now you. That's a legacy worth having." Wade met her eyes. "What I'm asking is that you take what I taught your father, what he taught you, and you pass it forward. Train them right. Hold the standards. Don't let politics or pressure compromise what matters." "I won't." "Good." Wade picked up the canvas bag. "One more thing. Your qualification next week. Those 4 candidates. They're going to come back different. They looked you up, saw your record. They know what you did yesterday. Some of them will be apologetic. Some will be defensive. All of them will be watching to see if you hold a grudge. I don't hold grudges. I hold standards." Wade smiled. "That's the right answer. But remember, teaching isn't just about showing them what to do. It's about showing them who to be, how to handle doubt, how to admit when they're wrong, how to grow. Your father understood that, so do you." He turned to leave. Stopped. "One last thing, the shot you made yesterday, 920 meters in the rain. Your father made a similar shot in Germany. Soviet spotter, storm conditions. Everyone told him to wait for the weather to clear. He said the mission didn't wait for weather, made the shot by feel, saved the operation. He never told me that story. He wouldn't have. John wasn't one for war stories. But I was there. I saw it. Same instinct you showed, same trust in fundamentals." Wade nodded once. "You're your father's daughter. Make sure the next generation knows what that means." He walked to his truck, drove away, left Rain standing at range 7, holding a 50-year-old manual and the weight of expectation that came with it. She opened the book again, read through the notes in the margins, her father's handwriting mixed with Wade's. Observations about wind, corrections for temperature, lessons learned the hard way in places most people would never see. This was what mattered. Not the medals or the recognition. This, the knowledge, the standards, the commitment to doing it right and teaching others to do the same. Rain closed the book, put it carefully in her truck, drove back to her barracks. The week passed in routine. Training, maintenance, preparation for the qualification course. She checked her rifle 3 times, verified the range setup, reviewed the course of fire she'd use for the 4 candidates. Wednesday morning arrived cold and clear. Rain drove to the range at 0830, set up her equipment, waited. The candidates arrived at 0850, all 4 of them, early. They climbed out of a government van and stood in a loose group near the equipment shed, the same shed where they'd stood a week ago, dry and certain, while she stood in the rain. But something was different now. Their posture, their expressions. They weren't laughing, weren't dismissive. They looked like men who'd learned something and weren't sure what to do with the knowledge. Rain walked over. "Gentlemen, ready to shoot," Ethan Collier spoke first. "Captain Kessler, before we start, I need to say something. We were wrong, all of us. We judged you before you'd done anything. That was unprofessional and disrespectful. I apologize." The others nodded. Nash Donovan stepped forward. "I sent a written apology through channels, but I want to say it in person. I was wrong. I won't make that mistake again." Davis Merrick looked uncomfortable. "My father trained with your father in '90. I knew the name Kessler. I should have believed it meant something. Bang. I'm sorry." Garrett Braddock said nothing for a long moment. Then quietly, "I've been shooting since I was a kid. Thought that meant something. Thought I knew what good looked like. You showed me I didn't know anything. I was arrogant. I was wrong. I'm here to learn if you'll teach me." Rain studied them, measured their sincerity, decided they meant it. "Apologies accepted. Now, let's see if you can shoot." She laid out the course of fire. 600 meters, 800 meters, 1,000 meters. Cold bore shot at each distance. 3 rounds per distance. Past standard was 2 hits out of 3 at each range. "This isn't about proving me wrong," Rain said. "This is about proving you're ready. Ready to deploy. Ready to do the job when it matters. Ready to be the help when help is needed." Questions? None. Then let's get to work. Ethan Collier shot first. He'd always had natural talent, but fear had held him back. Not anymore. He approached the firing line with confidence, born from understanding rather than arrogance. Set up his rifle, made his calculations, fired. 600 meters, 3 rounds, 3 hits, 800 meters, 3 rounds, 2 hits, 1 miss by inches, 1,000 meters, 3 rounds. The first hit center mass, the second hit low, the third hit center mass again. Rain walked over. "You passed, but that miss at 800 bothered you. You rushed the third shot at 1,000 trying to make up for it. Don't do that. Every shot stands alone. Learn from mistakes, but don't let them control the next trigger pull." Ethan nodded. "Understood, ma'am. Thank you. Your brother's recovering well. He asked about you. Said to tell you he's proud." Ethan's eyes went bright. He nodded again, couldn't speak. Nash Donovan shot next. Quiet, methodical. The kind of shooter who didn't waste movement or energy. His performance was solid. Not exceptional, but competent. 2 hits at 600, 2 at 800, 2 at 1,000. "You passed," Rain said. "You have good fundamentals. Keep training. You'll get better." "Yes, ma'am. Thank you for the second chance." Davis Merrick set up at the firing line. He was tense. Rain could see it in his shoulders, in the way he gripped his rifle too hard. "Sergeant Merrick," when she called, "before you shoot, come here." He walked over, confused, uncertain. "Your father," Rain said. "What was his name?" "Gunnery Sergeant Marcus Merrick. Marines, Desert Storm." Master Sergeant Garrison knew him. Said he was a good Marine, good shooter. Said he had one problem, though. He got in his own head, thought too much, second-guessed himself. Davis stared. "How did you know that?" "Because you're doing the same thing right now. You're thinking about last week, about being wrong, about proving something." "Oh, stop. The rifle doesn't care about your ego. It only cares about fundamentals. Breathe, relax, trust your training." Davis took a breath, let it out slowly. "Yes, ma'am." He walked back to the firing line, set up again. This time his movements were smoother, more natural. He fired. 600 meters, 3 hits, 800 meters, 3 hits, 1,000 meters. First shot missed low. He didn't react, adjusted. Second shot hit. Third shot hit. "You passed," Rain said. "Fine. That adjustment at 1,000, that's what separates good shooters from great ones. You didn't let the miss rattle you. You corrected and continued. Remember that." Davis smiled for the first time all morning. "Thank you, ma'am. My father would have appreciated what you said. Your father was right to be proud of you. Now make sure you keep earning it." Garrett Braddock was last. He approached the firing line with none of the swagger he'd carried a week ago. He looked nervous, maybe even scared. Not of the shot, of failing, of proving he couldn't do it. Rain walked over before he set up. "Specialist Braddock, why are you here?" He looked confused. To qualify, ma'am. Wrong answer. Try again. Garrett thought about it. To prove I can meet the standard. Wrong again. You're here because being a sniper matters. Because when 8 men are pinned down and need help, someone has to be good enough to provide it. That's why you're here. Not for yourself, for them. The words hit. Garrett's expression changed, understanding replacing anxiety. Now shoot, Rain said. He did. 600 meters, 2 hits, 1 miss, 800 meters, 3 burst hits, 1,000 meters. First shot missed, second shot missed. Garrett stopped, breathed. Rain could see him fighting frustration, fighting the urge to rush, fighting his own doubt. Third shot, hit, center mass. You passed, Rain said. Barely. That third shot at 1,000. You almost let the first 2 misses break you. But you didn't. You settled down, trusted the fundamentals, made the shot when it counted. That's the difference between going home and not going home. Garrett stood. I need to come back. Do this again. I barely passed. That's not good enough. You're right, it's not. But you recognize that. That's growth. Come back in 2 weeks, we'll run it again. Keep training. Yes, ma'am, thank you. The qualification ended at 1100 hours. All 4 candidates passed. All 4 had learned something. Rain watched them pack their gear and load into the van. They were different men than the ones who'd stood in the rain a week ago. Not perfect, not finished, but better. Ethan Collier approached before leaving. Captain, my brother wanted me to give you something. He handed her a challenge coin. SEAL Team 3. On the back an inscription, for the shot that mattered. Lieutenant Jake Collier. Rain turned the coin over in her hand. Simple, meaningful, the kind of thing warriors gave each other when words weren't enough. Tell your brother I'm glad he's okay. Tell him to heal up and get back to work. I will, ma'am. Ethan hesitated. Can I ask you something? Go ahead. How do you deal with the weight, knowing that your shot determines if people live or die? Rain thought about Sangra Province, about yesterday's mission, about 920 meters in an RPG that never fired. You don't deal with it, she said. You carry it. That's the job. That's what it costs. If you're not willing to carry that weight, find a different job. But if you are willing, then train harder than everyone else. Be better than everyone else. Because when it matters, there's no second place. There's only the shot you made or the shot you missed. Make sure you make it. Ethan nodded. Thank you, ma'am, for everything. The van drove away. Rain stood alone at the range. The morning sun had climbed higher. Heat was building. Another Carolina day settling into routine. She thought about the instructor position, about 2 weeks from now when she'd start training the next generation, about the female candidates who'd come through the program, about the standards she'd hold and the lessons she'd teach. She thought about her father, about Montana and blizzards and wolves circling at 400 meters, about the moment she'd learned that help wasn't something you waited for. Help was something you became. She thought about Wade Garrison and the manual he'd given her, about excellence earned and passed on, about the chain of knowledge that stretched back 50 years and would continue forward because people like her committed to maintaining it. Her radio buzzed. Range control. Captain Kessler, you have a call holding. Commander Harlow, should I patch it through? Go ahead. The radio clicked. Harlow's voice. Captain, hope I'm not interrupting. Just finished a qualification course. Good, I wanted to update you. Lieutenant Collier is being released from medical tomorrow. Full recovery expected. He asked me to tell you the shot you made saved his life and the lives of his team. He won't forget that. Glad he's okay. There's something else. The program, the female integration pipeline, it's moving forward, officially approved, standards remain unchanged. Training starts in 3 months. They want you leading the first class. Rain felt the weight of that settle. Leading the first class meant setting the tone, establishing the precedent, proving that integration could work without compromising effectiveness. I'll be ready, she said. I know you will. One more thing, personal question. Why'd you choose the instructor position over competition shooting? Rain looked out over the range, at the target standing silent in the distance, at the firing line where 4 men had just proven they could meet the standard, at the work that mattered more than medals or recognition. Because competition is about me, she said. Teaching is about them, about making sure the next person who stands on a ridge with a rifle knows what they're doing, about maintaining standards so that when help is needed, someone's ready to provide it. Your father said something similar when I asked him about teaching. Different words, same principle. He taught me well. He did. Make us proud, Captain. I will. The call ended. Rain gathered her equipment, loaded her truck, drove back across Fort Trenton. She passed the headquarters building where Colonel Morrison had given her the assignment, past the barracks where she'd made the decision, past the ranges where she'd proven herself over and over to people who'd already made up their minds. She thought about the manual Wade had given her, about the inscription she'd write inside the front cover when the time came, about the knowledge she'd pass forward to the next generation. Excellence is not inherited, it is earned then passed on. Her father had earned it, passed it to her. Now she'd pass it forward. To female candidates who'd faced the same doubt she'd faced, the same proving, the same exhaustion of being judged before they'd done anything to warrant judgment. She'd teach them what her father taught her, that competence mattered more than anything else, that standards existed for a reason, that when you stood behind a rifle and someone's life depended on your shot, nothing else mattered except making it. Rain parked at her barracks, went inside, cleaned her rifle one more time, even though it didn't need cleaning. The ritual mattered. The discipline mattered. The commitment to doing things right even when no one was watching. When she finished, she sat on her bed, opened the manual Wade had given her, read through the pages, her father's notes, Wade's corrections. Decades of knowledge compressed into margins and underlining. She thought about what she'd write when her turn came, what lesson mattered most, what truth she'd discovered that needed to be passed on. She picked up a pen, turned to the front cover. Below Wade's inscription and above the space where the next generation would write, she added her own, "Help isn't coming. Be the help. Captain Rain Kessler, U.S. Army, 2024. Simple. True. The lesson Montana had taught her at 12 years old. The lesson that had carried her through 11 years of service. The lesson that mattered more than any other. She closed the book, set it aside, lay back on her bed. Tomorrow she'd start preparing for the instructor position. Reading curriculum, reviewing training standards, planning how she'd teach the first class of the integration program. But tonight she let herself rest. Let the weight settle. Let the understanding sink in that she'd made the right choice. Not the easy choice, not the glamorous choice, but the right one. Outside, the sun dropped toward the western ridgeline. Long shadows stretched across Fort Trenton. Evening came with the promise of another day tomorrow, another chance to do the work. Rain closed her eyes, thought about her father one last time, about what he'd say if he could see her now, if he knew what she'd accomplished, what she'd chosen, where she was going. She knew exactly what he'd say. Same thing he always said when she'd done good work. Nothing at all. He'd just hand her the next challenge, the next shot, the next opportunity to prove that excellence wasn't about recognition. It was about the work itself, about doing it right when it mattered, about being ready when help was needed. She'd be ready. She was the help. 2 weeks later, Rain reported to the Special Operations Target Interdiction course, met with the commandant, reviewed the curriculum, prepared for her first class. 3 months after that, 5 female candidates arrived for the inaugural integration program. Different backgrounds, different stories, all of them carrying the same weight Rain had carried. The weight of having to prove themselves to people who'd already decided they didn't belong. Rain met them at the range on the first day, stood in front of them with her rifle and her record and the manual Wade had given her. "My name is Captain Rain Kessler," she said. "I'm your lead instructor. Standards here don't bend, not for me. Not for you. We earn every inch. Some of you will pass, some won't. The difference won't be talent. It'll be commitment. It'll be whether you're willing to do what it takes to be excellent." She paused, let the words settle. "A man named Wade Garrison taught my father in 1989. My father taught me, now I'm teaching you. This isn't about politics. This isn't about making history. This is about maintaining standards so that when 8 men are pinned down and need help, someone's ready to provide it." One of the candidates raised her hand, young, maybe 23, nervous but determined. "Ma'am, why are you here? You could be competing, winning medals, making money. Rain looked at her, saw herself at that age, saw the question behind the question, the doubt, the wondering if this was really possible. Because someone has to be the help, Rain said, and someone has to train the help. My father taught me that. Now I'm teaching you, she gestured to the range. Two. Now let's see if you can shoot. They could, some better than others, all of them committed, all of them willing to put in the work. Over the next 6 months, Rain trained them the way her father had trained her, the way Wade had trained her father. No shortcuts, no excuses, just fundamentals and repetition and the patient work of building excellence one shot at a time. 3 of the 5 candidates completed the program. 2 didn't make it, not because they were women, because they weren't ready. Same reason men failed. Same standard, same bar. The 3 who graduated went on to operational assignments. 1 joined a Ranger battalion, 1 went to a Special Forces support element, 1 became an instructor herself. The chain continued. Rain taught for 3 years, trained 47 students, male and female, different backgrounds, same standard. 31 graduated, 16 didn't. The numbers were the same as they had always been. The program worked because the standards held. Wade Garrison died in his sleep 2 years after giving Rain the manual. Lung cancer. He'd lasted longer than the doctors predicted. Long enough to see the integration program succeed. Long enough to know the knowledge would continue. At his funeral, Rain stood in dress uniform and thought about Berlin and Desert Storm and 40 years of teaching, about excellence earned and passed on, about the chain that connected generations of warriors who understood what mattered. She thought about her father, about Montana, about standing in the rain at Fort Trenton while 4 men dismissed her. She thought about the shot at 920 meters, about the RPG that never fired, about 8 men who came home. She thought about the manual, about the inscriptions inside the front cover, about the space where the next generation would write their lesson. The work continued. It always did. Because help wasn't something you waited for. Help was something you became. And when you became it, you taught others to do the same. That was the job. That was the legacy. That was what mattered. Rain Kessler understood that now. Not just in theory, in practice. In the daily work of maintaining standards, in passing knowledge, in making sure excellence survived. Her father would be proud. Wade would be proud. She was proud, not of medals or recognition, of the work itself, of the students who graduated and went on to do the job right, of the chain that continued, of the knowledge that passed forward. She stood at Wade's funeral and made a promise. She'd keep teaching, keep training, keep holding the standard, until the day came when she handed the manual to someone else and told them the same thing Wade had told her. Excellence is not inherited. It is earned, then passed on. Now pass it forward. The rain that had fallen at Fort Trenton that morning was long gone. The sky was clear. The future was uncertain. But the work remained. And Rain Kessler was ready. She was the help. She'd always be the help. That's what her father taught her. That's what she'd teach the next generation. And the work would continue one shot at a time forever.